Hello friends, this is Shivam Dubey from English Kingdom Katra Prayagraj. Welcome to the class. We are here continue with the Geoffrey Chaucer, and as we have promised, today it will be discussion on the legend of good women. But before that, we have to go for the question session from the sections, the portions that you have learnt before this study. Well, so here we go with the first question of the date. Where is the setting of the first part of the epic Beowulf? Where is the setting of the first part of the Beowulf? Good morning, everyone. There's a question about Beowulf. Where is the setting of the first part of Beowulf? Okay, so we find answer starting with Meera. She is followed by Uday, Vandana, Kalpana, Preeti and Neeraj. They have answered it correct, and that is here. That's a good one. Avanish, Shalini and Suman, they have also answered it to be 10 mark. What's the name of the poet whose 4 signed poems are available in the old period? What's the name of the poet whose 4 signed poems are available from the old period? Okay, you find answers that starts with no. My question is about the poet, not the poem. So answer it carefully. Still waiting. The name of the poet from the old period whose 4 signed poems are there. Well, so we find the answer. The first correct is from Meera. She is followed by Satyapal, Kalpana, Preeti, Uday, Pratima, Neeraj, Avanish, Vandana and Khushbu. They all have answered it correct, that it is Cenewulf. Okay. Where was Geoffrey Chaucer born? Where was Geoffrey Chaucer born? That's the next question. Now it is Suman. She has answered. Where was Geoffrey Chaucer born? Okay, we find the answer. That comes from Uday. That's Thames Street. But okay, we find that the answers are here. No. I think it's a Meera. No, Meera, it's not Thomas Street, beta. It's a Thames Street. Well, Satyapal, that's the same. Pratima, Vandana, Kalpana, Avanish, Preeti, Mandeep, and Shalini, they have answered it correct. That's the Thames Street. That's a good one. What was the name of the father of Geoffrey Chaucer? What was the name of the father of Geoffrey Chaucer? Okay, so we go with the answers. It starts with Meera. She is followed by Preeti, Avanish, Uday, Vandana, Mandeep, Pratima, Kalpana, Pooja, Suman, Satyapal, Shalini. They all have answered it correct, that it is John Chaucer. That's the correct one. Now I'll move with the next question. What's the name of the poem that by Geoffrey Chaucer that has the discussion on light and sound? What's the name of the poem by Geoffrey Chaucer that has the discussion on light and sound? Okay, you find the answer on the screen. That starts with Preeti. She is followed by Meera, Vandana. Oh, Meera, check your answer, beta. It's the House of the Fame that has this discussion. And now it's Mir Uday, Avanish, Pratima, Suman, Pooja, Satyapal, Kalpana, Mandeep. They all have answered it correct that it is House of Fame. That's a good one. We'll move to the next question. What was the name of the father of Cresida from the poem Troilus and Cressida? What was the name of the father of Cresida from the poem Troilus and Cressida? Well, so you find the answer. That's a good defense, Avanis. Well, it's a Khushbu, Meera. No, Suman. It's not Priam. No, Kalpana, it's not Priam. Well, that's a good one. Now it's Uday, Pratima, Preeti, Avanish, Mandeep. No, beta Satyapal, that's a mistake. Meera, Pooja, and Vandana. They have answered it correct to be Khalchas, the father of Cresida. Okay, moving with the next question. What's the number of days did Cresida promise to come back to Troilus? That's good one, Suman and Shalini. What's the number of days that Cresida promised to come back to Troilus? Preeti, what is that? Well, so it's starting with Khushbu, Uday, Meera, Mandeep, Kalpana, Vandana, Avanish, Viren, Suman, Pooja. They all have answered it correct that it is 10 days. Well, that's the 10 days she promised to come back to him. Okay. What's the name of the book by Geoffrey Chaucer that was written in 3 parts? What's the name of the book that was written in 3 parts by Geoffrey Chaucer? The name of the book that was written in 3 parts by Geoffrey Chaucer, and we find the answer that starts with Preeti, and now it's a Kalpana, Uday, and Pratima. They have answered it correct that it is House of Fame. Exactly, the House of Fame is the name of the poem by Geoffrey Chaucer. Now it's Meera, Neeraj, Mandeep, and Suman. They have also answered it correct that it is House of Fame. Now I'll move with the next question. What was the name of the second daughter of Geoffrey Chaucer? Second daughter of Geoffrey Chaucer. Okay, we find the answer that comes here from Uday or Preeti. She is followed by Uday, Meera, and they have answered it correct that it is Agnes. No, Pratima. She was the first one. The second daughter is supposed to be Agnes. Well, okay, so that's a good one, Neeraj. Vandana, Well, that's a good defense, Suman, Pooja, and Shalini. They have answered it correct that it is Agnes. Okay, moving with the next question. What's the name of the place where Geoffrey Chaucer was buried? What's the name of the place where Geoffrey Chaucer was buried? Okay, we find some answers on the screen. That comes from Meera. She is followed by Khushbu, Uday, Neeraj, Preeti, Mandeep, Vandana. They have also answered it correct to be Westminster Abbey, Poets Corner. Well, that's much better. That's much better, Kalpana. That's a good one. Well, it's Pooja, Viren, Avanish, Pratima, Shalini, Suman, Satyapal, Neerja. They all have answered it correct that it was Poets Corner, Westminster Abbey, where he was buried. What's the name of the first court poet of England? What was the name of the first court poet of England? Okay, you find answer. So Preeti says that what Thomas Chaucer. Uday says it's John Chaucer. Well, so the right answer is here from Suman. She says Geoffrey Chaucer. She is followed by Avanish. Oh no, Neeraj, it's a wrong one, beta. Well, Pratima, Khushbu, Meera, Neerja, Pooja, Bial, and Preeti. They have answered it correct to be Geoffrey Chaucer. Okay, so that's the correct answer. Moving with the next question. The next question is here. What was the name of the work that mentions the first use of Valentine's Day as important day for the lovers? Valentine's Day as important day for lovers. The first work by Chaucer mentioning this name. Good morning, Mamta. Okay, we find answer that starts with Uday. No, Preeti, it's not Troilus and Cresida. There isn't any issue like Valentine's. Well, so it's Pratima. She is followed by Kalpana, Mandeep, Vandana, Satyapal, Suman, Meera. They have answered it correct. That's the Parliament of Falls that are the first use of Valentine's Day as an important day for the lovers. Well, now it's Avanish, Mamta, Pooja, Viren, Neeraj, Neerja. They have answered it correct to be the Valentine's Day, and the name of the poem is the Parliament of Falls. That's a good one, BL. What's the name of the poem that was written on the request of John of Gaunt by Chaucer? What's the name of the poem that was written on the request of John of Gaunt by Geoffrey Chaucer? Avanish bhai, I haven't taught the Legend of Good Women so far, and your answer is Legend of Good Women. Okay, so going for the answers. And well, no, okay, so correct answer is here from Pratima, The Book of the Duchess. That's the correct. Now, oh no, Preeti, that's the wrong one. Wrong one, Viren. Well, okay, so Satyapal And no, Mamta, it's not the legend of good women. Well, Kalpana. So they have answered it correct that it is the book of the Duchess. Exactly, that's a good one, Shalini and BL. Okay, we'll move with the next question. What's the name of the poem by Geoffrey Chaucer that witnessed the first use of rhyme royal? That's a good one, Viren and Mandeep. Okay, we find the answer that starts with Preeti and she is followed by Uday, Neerja, Avanish, Satyapal, Mandeep. They have answered it correct that it is Troilus and Cresida. That's the name of the poem that sees the first use of rhyme royal. Now it is Meera, Mamta, Suman, Kalpana, and okay, Mandeep, it's BL, while Neeraj, they have also answered it correct to be Troilus and Cresida. Moving with the next. What is the main theme of the Parliament of Falls? What's the main theme of the poem, the Parliament of Falls? Okay, so we start with the answer, and the first answer comes here from Meera. She is followed by Preeti, Uday, Avanish, Suman, Mandeep. Oh no, Mandeep, that's not the answer, correct answer, beta. While Viren, Satyapal, Vandana, Neerja, Pooja, BL. That's very good, Pratima, exactly. While here's Preeti, Neeraj, Kalpana, and Khushbu. Okay, it's not valid, it's the will, free will of a lady. Okay, so the correct answer is freedom of expression, freedom of choice, free will. That's the correct answer. So you'll find that it's the correct answer from you all. Now moving with the next question. What's the stanza form of the House of the Fame? What's the stanza form of the poem House of the Fame? Oh, no, BLY, that's not the right answer. Well, my question is about the stanza form, not the line form. And you guys are answering like I have asked metric form. My question is stanza form. Tetrameter is not a stanza. It's a metric form. No, Khushbu beta. The first time rhyme royal was used in Troilus and Cresida. Well, exactly, that's iambic tetrameter, but the name of, okay, here is right answer. That comes from Preeti. She answers to be couplet. Exactly, the stanza form was couplet written in iambic tetrameter. That's the correct answer. Okay, what's the name of this scholar who called Chaucer is the earliest of the great moderns? What's the name of this scholar who called Chaucer is the earliest of the great moderns? Okay, we find answers on the screen. That starts with Preeti. She is followed by Meera. Oh, no, that's not correct one, beta. Well, it's Pratima and Kalpana, Suman, Mandeep, Mamta, Nirja, Vandana, Pooja, Viren, Neeraj, BL, and Satyapal. They have answered it correct that it is E. Albert. Now it is Sarita. She has also answered. God bless you, Sarita. Moving with the next question. Who stated he found his native tongue, dialect, and left it a language? Who stated he found his native tongue, a dialect, and left it a language? Well, so that's a good one. Uday bhai, try to give the complete name. That will give you more confidence. Otherwise, John Lowell, Robert Lowell, Rice Lowell, George Lowell, many confusion will be there. Okay, so here is Amira, but check the spelling. It's okay. So Robert Lowell, and now it is Preeti, Satyapal, Mamta, well, it's a Kalpana, Mandeep, Neeraj, Nirja, Pooja, Vandana, Suman, BL. They all have answered it correct that it is Robert Lowell. Now Sarita, she has also answered it correct. Okay. Who stated for Geoffrey Chaucer, the lodestar of our language? Who stated for Geoffrey Chaucer, lodestar of our fair language? Who stated for Geoffrey Chaucer as lodestar of our fair language? Okay, we find some answers on the screen that starts with Pratima. She is followed by Avanish. No, Devai. No, Meera. That's the wrong one, beta. The question is, lodestar of our language, who stated? Well, so Pooja is here with Neeraj, Kalpana, Mandeep, and they have answered it correct. That's a John Litigate. Okay, now it is Suman, Viren, Uday. They have also answered it correct to be John Litigate, the one who actually appreciated his language and later explained some parts left unfinished from his tales. Okay, so what's the name of the scholar who called that Chaucer was a compound of 30% of Goldsmith, 50% of Fielding, and 20% of Walter Scott? What's the name of this scholar who said Chaucer was a compound of 30% of Goldsmith, 50% of Fielding, and 20 of Walter Scott? We go with the right answers. No, Preeti, that's not Emily. Well, so the right answer starts with Uday. He is followed by Mandeep, Sarita, Pratima, Satyapal, Kalpana, Meera, BL, Suman, Avanish, Neeraj, Nirja, Viren, Mamta. They've answered it correct. That's A.W. Pollard. That's the correct answer. Well, moving with the last question of the day, and that is, what's the name of the scholar? What's the name of the work by Geoffrey Chaucer that has been appreciated by Sir Philip Sidney in his critical work in defense of poesy? What's the name of the work by Geoffrey Chaucer that has been praised highly by Sir Philip Sidney in his critical work, Defense of Poesy? Well, so we go for the answer, and now it is Uday, and it's followed by Neeraj, Meera, Satyapal, Suman, Sarita. They have answered it correct to be Troilus and Cressida. Troilus and Cressida, that's the poem that has been praised highly by Sir Philip Sidney in his critical work Defense of Poesy. Well, some more answers are just reflecting on the screen. It's a Preeti, Pooja, Mamta, and Mandeep. They have also answered it correct. Okay, now I'll move with the poem. That's the Legend of Good Women. Okay, so almost last poem from the Italian period, The Legend of Good Women. As we have promised to go with the text of the prologue of Canterbury Tales, so hopefully you guys have anyhow arranged the text, and tomorrow we will start. That will take some time, 3 or 4 days. We will study that poem, and that seems to be very important from your examinations point of view. So I would like to cover the poem with its text. Well, so here we're going with the Legend of Good Women. Why this poem was written? The very clear reflection is by the end of the poem, Troilus and Cressida. Okay, when we read the last portion of Troilus and Cressida, we come to know that after writing this poem that shows the infidelity of a lady, how she was unfaithful to her lover, how she deserted the lover of her. Chaucer himself felt a bit guilty because he always appreciated the ladies for their tolerance, forbearing, their faithfulness, the delicacies, and lots of things. Means he never expressed any idea that was against any lady. Even you see from the Parliament of Fall that he gives a free will, a freedom of choice through female, it's okay, that was a bird, but he was siding with female or siding with women. So somehow he was speaking for women, he was trying to defend women, he was trying to support the free will or ideas of the women. But when it comes to this poem, Troilus and Cressida, especially the disappointed lover's story, we find where man was cheated or deserted by a lady. So he himself felt guilty of writing such thing that he never thought to be right one. And almost he promised the then very moment to write some poem that will tell the beautiful stories of ladies, their faithfulness for the lovers, but they're being deserted by their lovers. So in fact, this is going to be the story of faithful and virtuous women. Well, even this was a daring effort from him. In what sense was it daring? We have to see. In fact, you know that the era he was living in wasn't the very modern like today. And we can see that on the very surface of this earth, just a streak of modernism, a streak of Renaissance is reflected in Florence of Italy. And we think that it's not very the effect of this Renaissance from Florence, but it was his personal thinking. And we don't find any kind of misleading details about his married life. He was always a loving husband, and as we'll see that he almost left the luxuries of royal and royal families and royal facilities after finding the death of his wife Philippa Royat. So I think it was a man most of the time was known to be deserting ladies. So he decided to write a beautiful poem that will tell the whole world how virtuous ladies are. Means once they promise someone, they promise it seriously, not like Cresida as she did. So Cresida seems to be exceptional, and the ladies we are going to talk here are going to be almost sure one. Well, once again, the poem is unfinished. Well, we find that poem has two prologues. Means generally we find one prologue, but here this poem has two prologue with introduction, what he wants to do and why he is writing this poem. You know, prologue is kind of introduction, detailing about the poem, about any work. Sometimes it can be in drama, sometimes it can be in poem, sometimes it can be in novel, anywhere. It's just a detailing the reason, the source behind writing something or behind doing something. So when he wrote this, we already see the question. Sometimes there can be, where was the seed of the legend of good women found in the work of Geoffrey Chaucer? So almost the seed of this work was found by the end of Troilus and Cressida, where he promised to write a book highlighting the legendary ladies. So it was actually the question that can be very similar to Paradise Lost. Most of the time the question arises here, where was the very seed of the Paradise Lost? So we generally answer, that's the ode on the morning of Christ's nativity. And here the same thing we find from Geoffrey Chaucer, and simply you can answer it's the Troilus and Cressida, where we find it to be the work, to be inspired, to be reason, this work. Another question can be, which work is the reason behind the writing of the legend of good women? So once again it will be Troilus and Cressida. If he hadn't written Troilus and Cressida, we can say there would have never been a work like Legend of Good Women. Okay, so why did I introduce you the two prologues? The reasons are there. The first one, well, after deciding that he will write something especially about the life of the legendary women, we find that he had a beautiful time, that's about spring once again, and he was dreaming actually. So the first prologue is about the time. You know why spring is mentioned is about love. Whenever spring in the first section, it's the season of spring in the first section. Once again we will find the season of spring in the opening of the prologue of Canterbury Tales. Once again we will find. So why here is it mentioned? It's very clear. Because in a spring, most of the time, we find the lovers falling in love. It's a spring, it's a beauty, it's an energy that makes people realize the need of emotional support or sometimes even physical support from the opposite gender very soon. So poet is young because here we will find that the poet is here once again in his narration as a narrator. Geoffrey Chaucer himself is the narrator. He is present in the poem. Most of the poem, you see, most of the poem are dream allegory. Most of the poem are dream allegory. Even this poem we find as a dream allegory, not entirely, but as a dream allegory. Whenever one writes dream allegory, one has to be the part of that piece, because I think I have defined the dream allegory is a piece that had been the dream version of the poet himself. Whatever he sees as a dream, he writes about that. So he himself is a part of dream vision. So you find that there you will find everywhere, almost from the House of the Fame or even in the Book of the Duchess, you find that the poet himself is part. Well, just one piece, once again I can say, Troilus and Cressida is a bit different. That seems to be without the poet's presence, and that goes with the background of Troy automatically without his falling asleep. So that doesn't seem to be a piece of his that can be as a part of his dream allegory. Otherwise, most of the poems you see that it is dream allegory. Even about this is going to be spring season, poet thinking about a beautiful lover, beloved, he falls asleep. Then there is a presence of the second prologue. You see the second prologue. There is presence of Cupid, the god of love, and Alceste. She is the guardian of the legendary ladies. The two appear in the dream of the poet himself, Alceste and Cupid. Well, the two have the reason why they appeared in the dream of the poet, because Cupid, as a god of love, was actually angry why the narrator or the poet has written a piece like Troilus and Cressida. Cupid is angry why the narrator or poet has written an ugly piece, in a word, like Troilus and Cressida, where he, poet, tried to show that women generally perform infidelity and they are selfish, faithless. Why? Cupid, as a god of love, just scolded, chided the poet, and poet seems to be ashamed of. Well, I told you that the time is spring, okay? And during this spring season, he, as a narrator, thought for a beautiful beloved. That's the appearance of Alceste. With a look of daisy, she comes there, and she is attractive. She is also a spirit. She is a goddess. And she asked him, okay, if he has written anything for infidelity of lady, it is okay. But now he should try to write some pieces. He should write some pieces that can highlight the virtuous nature of ladies. Means just one lady and many ladies. There are many legendary stories that are there. So why should he be writing Troilus and Cressida carelessly? So it's Alceste who asked the narrator to compose a poem that will highlight the quality of legendary ladies of England or anywhere, legendary ladies, especially from Greek. Because this had been almost the last piece that we are discussing in the class from the Italian period. Okay, now he will decide to write. Well, according to prologue, we know that in the beginning he promised to go for the 20 legends. If we study the prologue, we find that he decided to go for the 20 legends or 20 stories. But there is length, I may say that the length of the poem is the reason that he could complete only 8 tales, completed 8 tales, and left the 9th unfinished. 9th tale unfinished. Means sometimes we find how many tales could he complete. Actually, he could complete only 8 tales. But how many tales did he write? Try to see the question. How many tales did Chaucer complete? Then it's 8 tales. But the question is, how many tales did Chaucer write? So definitely, even the 9th was he writing. So 9 tales. Okay. So in that condition, this one and the 9th, it makes to be 9 tales. So 2 different questions. How many tales he could complete? Then it is 8. And how many tales did he write? Then it is 9. Okay. And 9th was unfinished. Why this 9th tale was unfinished? I may say because of the length of the poem. The 3 poems of Chaucer seems to be a very longer one. One, Troilus and Cressida. The next is Canterbury Tales, and this one, The Legend of Good Women. Troilus and Cresida. Canterbury Tales. And the next is The Legend of Good Women. And it was left unfinished, otherwise you may imagine what would be the length of this poem. So there is Troilus and Cressida, the Canterbury Tales, and The Legend of Good Women seems to be his longest work. Okay, well, if we go to Canterbury Tales, we will find there the monk's tale. There's a tale of monk. Remember, this monk's tale is going to be similar to the tales, to the stories that are narrated here. Means moralistic, virtuous ladies. From Canterbury Tales, the tales of monk is going to be virtuous one, like the tales Geoffrey Chaucer himself is telling here. So some scholars think possibly Chaucer himself was the monk there. Some scholars believe possibly Chaucer himself was the monk there. Well, we have already discussed that the poem was written in heroic couplet. The first use of its own, and we have already discussed that before this heroic couplet there was already the octosyllabic couplet, means tetrameter, but Geoffrey Chaucer goes for the next and he included one more meter, two more syllables, and made it to be heroic couplet with decasyllabic pattern. So Legend of Good Women is the poem where we see the first use of heroic couplet. Okay, now I'll move to some more points about this poem. I didn't discuss heroic couplet more because we have already discussed some essential point of this stanza form. Remember, heroic couplet is a stanza form. So if ever I ask you, don't try to tell me iambic pentameter, because pentameter is not a stanza form. That's a metric form. Okay? And if I ever ask a syllabic pattern, then tell it iambic. Don't tell pentameter. Okay? So different questions, different answers. Well, so when it comes to the reason behind why this poem was written, the one reason is the poet himself, as we discussed, that he felt guilty of writing Troilus and Cresida and showing that infidelity of lady. The second reason seems to be the end of Bohemia. The second reason seems to be end of Bohemia. Well, definitely Chaucer's effort writing the poem can be his own, but it seems that Anne of Bohemia also requested Chaucer to write the poem. Well, according to the poem, it seems to be Alceste, the goddess, but that's from poem. If outside the poem, it is asked who requested for the writing of the poem, The Legend of Good Women. So most scholars agree that it is Anne of Bohemia who requested Chaucer to write this. And this is why it seems to be the record that if this was the request of Anne of Bohemia, she came to get married with Richard II, and the time seems to be 1382 around, she visited. If this is going to be true, see, we are just talking about the possible records, okay? If this record is going to be truth, because of this request, the first one was John of Gaunt, you already know that he requested him to write the book of the Duchess, and now it seems to be another royal. Why don't we say that possibly from there he started writing as a court poet? Because John of Gaunt was not from the royal family, especially from the court. But Anne of Bohemia, you remember that now Richard II from 1377 to 1399 will be the king of England, and now being the wife or going to marry with someone, so this can be seen as a request of queen to a poet to write something for her own interest. And this is why the scholars say that he was the first poet laureate or the first court poet. Poet laureate or court poet. No doubt it was of its own kind, because later on this we find the actual description of the poet laureate with John Dryden. Even before John Dryden, almost a similar kind of pension has been mentioned for Ben Jonson as well, and that seems to be for the scholars that Ben Jonson was also possibly the first poet laureate, but you know that he was not accepted officially. Officially means a kind of rule that was governed by parliament, not by the king or queen. And if you remember, with the glorious revolution of 1688, that we call to be the bloodless revolution as well, the establishment of parliament was done. Now parliament had the right to decide who will be the king, and from there it starts the office. Means a poet officially given the pension and all such thing according to the rule of parliament, not the king. And in 1688 it was John Dryden. Definitely he was appointed in 1668, but the official announcement for him was after the establishment of Parliament of Fall, though he was soon replaced by his rival, his friend Thomas Shadwell. Okay, so the term definitely we relate it with John Dryden, but before John Dryden, we find that Geoffrey Chaucer as the first court poet. And remember, if ever you are asked to tell for which poem do we find Chaucer being considered as a poet laureate or court poet, so this is going to be the first. The Legend of Good Women. The Legend of Good Women is going to be the poem for which we find Chaucer to be entitled as the court poet of England. Okay, because we find a record. Remember, this is a queen. We don't find the record from the former king or queen and even later, but yeah, it's Richard II and his wife that seems to be requesting for some good work on the characters of ladies, because through this poem Troilus and Cresida he tried to prove the ladies are especially for infidelity. This record, the record that's very much similar to Alceste, if you see that this is the original record that we find that N was there, and according to poem it was Alceste. The two had a similar command, means you see that here Queen N requested, but here she commanded. Queen Alceste commanded. According to the poem I have just told you that Cupid and Alceste appeared and they asked something. So many scholars think that it was the image of N that had been presented in the form of Alceste in the poem. Means he wanted to tell the world that he was asked by some queen, Queen Alceste, Queen N, to write this poem. So if sometimes you are asked, whom did Alceste stand from the court life of Geoffrey Chaucer? So your answer will be N, N of Bohemia. About this, John Lydgate has also given a record. John Lydgate in The Fall of Princess, The Fall of Princess is a work by John Lydgate. John Lydgate. Even John Lydgate gave the record that it was possibly the request of Queen Anne to be writing this piece, and this is how we find the support for the answer as well. Okay, many discussions are there. The next discussion comes over the name of Joan of Kent. Joan of Kent, not John, okay? Joan of Kent. Now, Joan, she was mother of Richard II. Joan of Kent was mother of Richard II. So, according to some records, it's a Queen Anne who asked, and some records or scholars say that the mother of Richard II asked Geoffrey Chaucer to write this piece and become the model for Alceste. Remember, we are talking about the models for Alceste. So it can be Queen Anne or Anne of Bohemia, and the next can be Joan of Kent, mother of Richard II. Okay, when it comes to the sources for the poem, we find many sources there. The most striking source for the poem seems to be Virgil's Aeneid. Virgil has written the piece Aeneid, and this seems to be the main source for the story of Dido. Remember, I will tell some names of the legends that have been discussed here. The next is Historia. Historia Destructionis, Troy. Historia Destructionis Troy. This seems to be the story behind the stories of Troy and was the work of a Troy writer, Guido delle Cologne. Guido delle Cologne. Cologne. So it was the work of Cologne, Storia Destructionis Troy, that can be another source for the piece. The next is fabula. Fabula. The next work is fabula. This can be another source for this piece. Remember, many legends are there, so many sources are there. Okay, so it can be fabula as the next source for the piece. That was the work of Gaius Julius Hyginus. Gaius Julius Hyginus. So fabula was work of Hyginus, Gaius Julius Hyginus. This is another source for the piece. The next is the work of Ovid. Ovid, that is Metamorphosis. Metamorphosis. And sometimes the next work, Heroids, is also considered. Heroids is also considered to be the piece inspiring Chaucer as a source to write this piece. There are some more sources, but these are main sources you have to remember. The first and major one seems to be Virgil when he wrote his Aeneid. The next is going to be Storia Destructionis Troy. That was the work of Guido delle Cologne. The next is Fabula. That was the source written by Gaius Julius Hyginus. And here seems to be Ovid's work. That's the Metamorphosis, and Heroids can be another work that seems to be the source for these pieces. Means many legends are there, so you cannot just center on just one source. And now we will go to the ladies whose story could be told in this piece, because you know that he just could complete the, not complete, I mean to say complete 8 and left the 9th unfinished. So there are actually 9 sections that have been completed. I mean to say 9 tales, but these 9 tales will cover the legend of 10 ladies, means 10 stories, 9 section. The legend of good women will tell us the stories in 9 sections, but in 9 sections there will be the story of 10 ladies, 10 legends. So he could cover 10 legendary women in his 9 sections, or you can say 9 tales. So 10 ladies will be described here. The story is in 9 sections, but the story of the 10 ladies are narrated. Please write down their name. The first one is Cleopatra. Cleopatra. The next one is Thisbe. Thisbe. The next one is Hypsipyle. The next is Medea. The next is Philomela. The next is Phyllis. The next is Hypermnestra. The next is Adrian. The next is Lucrece. The next is Dido. Well, I think there should be 10. Yeah. So these 10 actually ladies have been described with their legends. Means the legend of Cleopatra, legend of Thisbe, legend of Hypaspele, legend of Medea, legend of Philomela, legend of Phyllis, legend of Hypermnestra, legend of Adriani, legend of Lucrece, and legend of Dido. Well, I think the two legends are already known to you. That's the legend of Lucrece, somewhat you know from Shakespeare, The Rape of Lucrece. And the next is Cleopatra, because we have learnt a lot from Shakespeare and G.B. And this had been actually the center of attention for many critics, though different version of this character we see. But the longest tale is going to be the tale of Dido. This is going to be the longest tale. Or legend will be the tale of Dido. Okay. When we comes to, once again, the Canterbury Tales, we find that there is a character, man of law. In Canterbury Tales, this character, man of law. Well, this man of law is a great fan of Geoffrey Chaucer. Remember, this man of law from Canterbury Tales. Remember, this character is in Canterbury Tales, the Canterbury Tales, and through his speech, we comes to know that it is the man of law who is a great fan, admirer of Geoffrey Chaucer, and through his speech, one statement is that reminds us about the legend of good women. The statement was related to the saint's legend of Cupid. Saint legend of Cupid, and this saint legend of Cupid is going to remind us the title of the poem, The Legend of Good Women. So it seems that the man of law had already studied, had already read the piece That was the legend of good women, and possibly being inspired from this presentation, this writing style of Geoffrey Chaucer, this man of law appreciated Chaucer for writing such a piece that was praiseworthy, that was inspiring, that was somehow modeling the ladies before the whole world, presenting them not with some natures that can make them to be underestimated. Instead, the legends or characters whom we can praise highly. So this had been appreciation from Chaucer himself. We can say Chaucer himself praised highly the piece that was Legend of Good Women, but the title he used was the 10th Legend of Cupid. Why? You know, already in the very beginning of the prologue of this piece, we find that Cupid comes and asks, actually he scolded him. Why he wrote the story of Cresida? Because many good ladies and virtuous ladies are there. He should try to cover the stories related to them. So this is going to tell us about this one. Actually, there are many writers, I can say, when I am describing you, I can say very clearly that it is the next work that has been inspired from this piece as well. You remember that this piece had been actually working as a title. Remember Lucrece we have just discussed? And this Lucrece becomes definitely Lucrece is from Metamorphosis. Ovid has written it. But when it comes for Shakespeare, we can see that this Lucrece of Geoffrey Chaucer can be as a model for Shakespeare once again. In the same way, the same piece, if you remember, Antony and Cleopatra, the legend of Cleopatra is going to help Shakespeare to write this play. Not the same one, because the main sources are there from the Troy, main sources are from the Rome, but somehow the treatment of character is going to move around this character of Geoffrey Chaucer. So he was inspiration. In the same queue, we find that there is a poem written by Alfred Tennyson, The Dream of Fair Women. Alfred Tennyson. He has written a piece with the title, A Dream of Fair Women. Exactly the word like fair women is not like beautiful women. Okay? Instead, if we see the piece, it's going to be the reminiscent of the virtuous ladies. Well, even Tennyson can be seen as a man who always trusted ladies. We cannot forget the role of Emily in his life, how she encouraged Alfred Tennyson to be writing, not to be marrying so soon just after falling in love, and she becomes a kind of guide for him. So ladies are not always as thought to be devilish nature, or always thought to be very selfish and can be faithless. No, it is not so. So the next man who supported the ideas of a legendary Geoffrey Chaucer was another legendary person, Tennyson, and he wrote this beautiful piece, A Dream of Fair Women, once again presenting some ladies from the virtuous world. Well, when this piece comes to the estimation of the characters, we cannot go like what should be the records, but definitely we find that the piece is going to be an important work, and we cannot actually complete the legend today. There are many stories and legends that I have to narrate to you. So I think we should go one more day on this legend. Definitely it's a depthy, and we'll take one more day on this piece. So the main points have been discussed, like the source, the characters that have been narrated, and exactly the 10 ladies are there and 10 left there. So if you don't mind, I'd want to tell you the next 10 ladies that can be possible. The source whom he actually wanted, possibly he wanted to write, but he couldn't complete. I must say that, well, some name you can note. The name he has mentioned in his prologue, except these 9 that you have already noticed, these 10 actually, you have noticed. There are going to be the ladies that you can note. It seems to be Esther, the next whom from the records of the prologue we can say that possibly he wants to talk about them. The next is Penelope. Remember Penelope? She is a legendary lady as a wife of Ulysses. And if you remember, she kept waiting her husband for 20 years. The Ulysses were absent from Ithaca for 20 years. So that's the story of Penelope. The next is Marcia Catonis. Marcia Catonis. That's the next piece. The next is Lavinia. If you remember Lavinia? Yes, sir. Thank you. Lavinia you have seen from the play of Shakespeare, Titus Andronicus. She is there. Next is Polyxena. Polyxena, that's the next character that he wanted to discuss. The next is Laodamia. Laodamia. Remember the poem by William Wordsworth? The next is Iseult. Iseult, that's a piece. Remember Helen? Possibly he wants to discuss Helen as well. Canes. The next is Canes and Hero. If you remember, Hero. Canes and the next is Hero. You have read Hero in Much Ado About Nothing. So these were the next legends. Actually, thank you, Sarita. These had been the next legends that he wanted to present in his story but couldn't complete. Means there are just 9 sections. In 9 sections, he discusses about 10 ladies. You know, in the very opening, we see that Chaucer wanted to tell us 20 tales, 20 legendary ladies to be presented. So in fact, so it was not complete. It was not complete, so we cannot be very definite. But hopefully, according to his writing pattern, we can say just one thing. Perhaps Chaucer has a plan to present 20 ladies, 20 legendary ladies in 19 tales. Because just 9 tales are completed. It's our calculation that says 9 tales are completed and there are 10 ladies. So on 10 left, we can hope that he will give next 10 sections to complete it. This is why some scholars say that possibly Chaucer had a plan to write 20 legendary stories in 19 sections. Had a plan to write, though he could not complete. So what he could complete is the story of 10 ladies in 9 sections, where 8 were completed, 9th was left unfinished. And the stories whose he could not complete were Esther, Penelope, Marcia, Catonis, Lavinia, Polyxena, Laodamia, Iseult, Helen, Candace, and Hero. These are the legendary ladies whose stories he could not complete. So hopefully you found a lot of things related to the background of this actually legendary piece of Geoffrey Chaucer. It's not just the name of this poem, just not the title of this poem that includes the legend of good women. Actually, the treatment of this poem, the writing style, the characters, everything is legendary. So that's all from me on the background and the details, some details from this beautiful piece. Next time, we will discuss about the legends, means the ladies that can be possible in the class. We will discuss here. Okay, thanks a lot for watching. Keep watching, keep learning, and keep working hard. Thank you very much.